Corona guys, how you all doing? I'm just here in my house today, feeling a little bit bored. And I know probably most of us have been a lot more home lately than normal, not seeing a lot of people. I've been running this question through my mind a lot lately. Do these people really exist? Now, what do I mean by that? Let me first give you guys an example of the kind of people I'm talking about, and then we can discuss the question at hand. So, the first person I want to talk about is this beautiful man right here. His name is Martin Fourcade. He's a French biathlete who just retired this past weekend after winning his very last race. Beautiful, beautiful moment. It was his 83rd international victory. 4 individual Olympic golds, 11 individual World Championship golds, 8 overall titles in a row. And can you believe, for many years I didn't like this guy at all. And it was mainly because he was the best and he knew it. So let me show you an example here from the Sochi Winter Olympics in 2014. He's yet to win an individual Olympic gold. So this is about to be his first one. This is the last shooting where it's all going to be decided. And you can see he clears all the targets. And the race is not even finished yet, and he still celebrates, which by Norwegian standards can be seen as cocky or nonchalant, however you want to put it. That kind of attitude, it really bugged me for many years. And here you can see another example, the last shooting. This is his very first World Cup win. He's never won before, and he still celebrates after the last shot. Now mind you, he still has to race the final loop, but he's so confident that he's going to win that he takes the time out to celebrate. And like I said, for many years this really annoyed me. And it wasn't until the 2016-2017 season, which in fact was his most successful season out of all, that I was able to enjoy watching him race. Because before the Christmas break he was virtually unbeatable. He won almost every single race, and I remember saying to myself, either I can continue moping and whining, or I can start to enjoy watching this great athlete perform. And that's what I did. And since then I've just been amazed at his level of prowess and consistency. The second person I want to talk about is this hero right here, Alberto Contador. Spanish cyclist who won 9 Grand Tours in his career. Now his story is very different from Fourcade's, being that he's a convicted doper. He never admitted to doping, and he said the positive test was from some foul beef that he'd eaten in China. But personally I would be more surprised if it turns out he didn't dope than if it turns out that he did dope. Regardless, his career was absolutely fantastic. His breakout year was in 2007, you can see him here, during the Tour de France, which he won after a lot of controversy when the leader, Michael Rasmussen, was thrown out of the race with only a few stages remaining. Alberto Contador was put into the leader's jersey, which he surprisingly managed to hold on to in the final time trial. Now in the next year, his team wasn't invited to the Tour de France, so he went and won the Giro and the Vuelta in the same year. 2009, he absolutely dominated the Tour de France. In 2010, he won in slightly less dominating fashion. In 2011, he was again unsure whether his team would be invited or not, so he went to the Giro, which he won convincingly. Then he went to the Tour after all, now with the Giro in his legs. And after a series of unfortunate events, he found himself on the back foot going into the last mountain stage, and he launched this brutal attack with 93 kilometers to go. And I guess this is what happens when you win a lot early in your career. Contador is famous for saying that second place is the first loser. So instead of saving second or third place, Contador went for broke, tried to get first, ended up in 5th. After this, he was out for almost a full year because of the doping, and when he came back in the fall of 2012 for the Vuelta a España, he was far from the same cyclist. He struggled to make the difference in the mountains, and he couldn't shake Joaquin Rodriguez, who was leading the race. So in stage 17, he went for another absolutely crazy attack. He went early, he bridged to his teammates up the road. By sheer determination, he wasn't that good this year. He was able to get the win on this stage, take over the leader's jersey, and hold on to win the Vuelta. He went for broke, and he wasn't the best by far in this race, but he still managed to find a way to win. He went back to the Tour de France the year after and was humiliated, more or less, by Chris Froome, who was now the best cyclist in the world by far. He went home and trained over the winter, Contador I mean. Came back 2014, had one of the best seasons of his career. And when Froome tried to shake him in the Dauphiné, which is leading up to the Tour de France, for the first time in 2 years, he wasn't able to get a gap in the mountains. And it was only Contador who managed to hold on. You can see here Froome is trying to shake him. And it was turning up to a big battle between the two in the Tour de France. Then on one of the early stages, Froome fell, broke his wrist, so he had to pull out. Then later, Contador fell, broke his tibia under his knee, and he also had to retire from the race. So we didn't get to see the two of them go head to head that year, but yeah, you can see the attack from Froome here. Let's just watch this. I remember when this happened live, I was feeling so much anxiety. My heart rate was through the roof, and I had to walk away from the TV. After watching this, I had to go downstairs, go outside, get some fresh air, breathe, and then I could go back inside again. Anyway, we didn't get to see the battle in the Tour de France, but both of them were back in action for the Vuelta, and Froome tried to shake Contador, but he wasn't able. You can see here on stage 16, Contador is able to make the difference and pull away from Froome. And this was the first time in over 2 years that Froome was beaten cleanly. That was a big moment. Contador showing that he was still, even though he was far from what he'd been before, he was still a force to be reckoned with. Now, over the next 2 seasons, I mean, he won the Giro in 2015, but yeah, he wasn't that good like he'd been before. 2017, he wasn't good also, but some way, somehow, he managed to win his final race on the steepest of climbs, the Angliru, in the Vuelta a España. This was his very final opportunity to win, and he pulled out the victory. The third and last person I want to talk about is Norwegian chess player Magnus Carlsen. Current world number 1, he's been that for 10 years. He's won a host of big tournaments. He's the current reigning world champion of all time controls, and he was a child prodigy for many years before he entered the big stage. And here he is playing against the world champion at that time, Garry Kasparov, as a 13-year-old. And the game even ended in a draw, which was impressive. Now, I don't pretend to understand chess in any sort of capacity, but I still want to talk about how people perceive chess, and especially pro chess players, because I think a lot of the times what people find impressive is how these grandmasters are able to calculate, how they're able to visualize and look at variations which sound like utter nonsense when people who don't really play chess hear them talk about and watch them play. I think a lot of the time what people find impressive, they will say like, oh man, they can calculate 20 moves ahead, he can play against 50 people at the same time, he can even play blindfolded. Yeah, for sure, all of that is impressive, but it doesn't really speak to how these guys perceive chess and the ability that makes them able to do these things. So here's an article about Carlsen's inhuman memory, and they reference an interview that was done by ChessBase India, where they give Carlsen 9 positions from famous Vishy Anand games, and he's able to recall 8 out of those 9 games just from watching a position on the board that happened during those games. Of course, it's impressive, but as Carlsen says, he's played so many games against Anand, including 2 World Championship matches, so it shouldn't be any surprise that he's able to remember many of his games. And then they ask him if he's saved a lot of games in his head in this way. And he says, no, he doesn't save games at all. What he saved through playing chess, practicing for so many years, is the patterns that make up the different positions. And through that pattern recognition, he's able to apply it to specific games and specific positions. And it's much, much easier for a brain that has all those patterns stored to remember exact games that are presented to them. And here's an example of Carlsen explaining what he thinks is important also. This is from the Chess Olympics 2014, where he shows a sequence of moves from a game that he just played. And here he's talking about nuances. That sequence of moves, it ended up in 2 different positions. Here you can see one that is not favorable because the opposing king has more space and Carlsen's queen is on the wrong square. But then the sequence of moves that Carlsen more or less forced during the game ended up in this position where the queen is on the preferable diagonal and the opponent's king doesn't have the space that it had in the other position. And this turned out to be enough of an advantage for Carlsen to pull out the victory. So it's those very, very small things that is impressive. Now that I've presented my 3 exhibits, I want to get back to the original question. Do these people really exist? At surface level, duh, of course. They exist, we've just watched them do their thing. But the question goes a little bit deeper than that. Does Martin Fourcade exist if he was born 10 years earlier? Does Alberto Contador exist if he was born in a different country? Does Magnus Carlsen exist if his father never teaches him chess? That's what I want to get into. All of these 3 people started winning at an early age, and by their early to mid-20s, they were the best in the world at their sport. And they won the biggest events, they never shied away from any challenger. They all had certain things that happened to them early in their careers. For example, Contador, during a race, he had a brain aneurysm. He almost died. Fourcade had an older brother who was also a biathlete. Magnus Carlsen was taken out of school by his parents and they traveled around the world just so he could play chess in his early teens, I think. Another thing that I also find very impressive about the 3 of them is that even when they weren't at their best, when there were other people that were clearly in better shape, that were clearly better prepared, probably should have beaten them, in many cases they still found a way to win. During those decisive moments, they managed to stay calm. During those decisive moments, they managed to stay calm and squeeze a victory out of thin air, almost. But what is really on my mind is whether these people are a force of nature or if nature has forced itself upon them. Could you put them anywhere at any time and they would still be winners? That is what I want to know. I know it's not possible to find out, but the concept is very intriguing to me. And I choose to believe that yes, you could put them anywhere, anytime, and they would still find a way to win. And I find that to be a very empowering thought, because it means that the same could be applied to you and me, basically. We're the masters of our own destiny, and if we want to, then sky's the limit.